The next one, community plot ratio, is again, I think, something that would please Charles Courier, because I think as cities get more dense, most people associate that with a loss of community space. But I think it's completely within our control as a development industry to create community space. And if we track it and measure it, I think it's a way where we can start coming to an ideal outcome into how much community space we need in our cities. So here we have 150% of the site as community space. The next index, Civic Generosity Index, really measures if your building was a person, what sort of citizen would they be? And so we have a way of calculating this in the book, but it's basically about how the building interacts with the city, how it offers shelters to passers-by or facilities, and how it basically behaves as a good citizen in the city. We gave ourselves 100% for this one. Ecosystem Contribution Index says, well, if we're going to have green spaces, can they actually perform at a higher level? So is it just about a pretty garden, or is it actually something which can start hosting birds and animals and insects? And interestingly, since we started doing this, we found there's a small group of professionals around the world called urban ecologists, and there's actually some rating system for this as well, which is quite sophisticated. So our next projects, we're going to have a more highly developed version of the ecosystem. And the last one is Self-Sufficiency Index, is a rating like LEED or Green Mark. But we thought it was really important to measure it against a sort of ultimate end goal of buildings that were completely self-sufficient in food, energy, and water. And because I think if you get a LEED Platinum, you feel quite good. But actually, in terms of the problems we need to solve with cities, LEED Platinum doesn't get you very far. So in fact, this is a Platinum scoring building in Singapore, but we're only 1% self-sufficient in energy, 0% self-sufficient in food. And water, we were able to score 65 because Singapore itself, as a nation, has a national water recycling scheme in place. So nationally, we recycle 65% of the water. So this is just a reminder, no matter how many platinum awards we give ourselves, we still have an urgent task to keep improving. So here's an image of the building in the city. So interestingly, the park in front of the building, we have as much green inside our building as there is in the park outside. We achieved that through a combination of horizontal and vertical greening. And here you can see the ground level. We have a substantial amount of garden, as well as water gardens and other landscaping that we offer to passers-by who go just past the building on their daily walk. Here you can see on the section that the sort of large landscape that people perceive from the outside is actually an above-ground car park. And this is one of the ways we managed to adjust the budgets in the project to be able to do this landscaping. The original feasibility study for the project had a large underground car park, and that had a big cost in terms of structure and time. By lifting it up and turning it into a garden, we save millions of dollars, and in terms of the life cycle of the building, we save 50 or 60 years of artificial lighting and artificial ventilation by having it lifted up. Above that, we have 3 levels of gardens with the hotel rooms distributed between them. So this is the experience for the pedestrian who's just walking past the building. They get to enjoy walking through the hotel experience. And it's a very perforated building. We make connections through the building for the city, visual connections as well, where it's very transparent. Oops, same section again, sorry. The next level is on top of the car park. We have almost a full area of the site as another garden, here with the swimming pool, function terrace, and various meeting rooms and spa. And so this is the experience that you get up on the building. It's a sort of, we were interested in the building being sort of a simultaneously a very sort of civic building, and that it has colonnades and loggias and areas that are in some ways quite traditional. At the same time, make it like a very romantic landscape. So it's also like being in a resort or on a cliff or inside a sort of grotto or a Chinese painting. And that combination of being two things at once was something we found very creatively productive. Interesting, many architects were very uncomfortable with it, saying that they found it a sort of corrupted building in that way. It wasn't pure enough. But our biggest response has been from members of the public who the minute they see it in the street, they stop and they stare, they take photos, and immediately try and get inside and come up to these areas. So I think it's something that the romantic landscape nature of the project has made it a building that people really respond to emotionally. So from the rooms you have this series of cascading terraces. And for a city hotel, it was very unusual. We made external corridors. So when you walk to your room, you're actually walking through a garden. You can hear the city. You can, in fact, smell the food court next door, the exciting smells of people frying noodles and things. And so most people have found it a sort of heightened experience of the city, which they really like. So you can see here how we incorporate both horizontal and vertical planting through it. And interestingly, at the back it faces some public housing blocks, and one of our staff is living in one of the apartments there. And when the building was finished, the landlord said he was increasing the rent because the building going up in front of it had improved the view. So he said now he had a garden view, he had to pay more. From inside the room, what the landscape does is something quite nice. Often in a high-rise building, the window feels a bit like a TV screen. You know, you don't have much sense of a spatial quality to it. By having the landscaping outside and framing the view, it does some interesting things to your experience of the city. It sort of simultaneously brings the view up to the window, and it also pushes the background further away. People also report that they feel a lot more comfortable in the room with the trees outside. They don't feel so exposed when they stand at the window looking at the view. Instead, they feel sort of protected by the building. Now let me see if the video is going to start. It's going to work. Yeah, it's working. So I have a little video of the project. We've been using drones to photograph our projects over the last year or two. And we found drones are really the best way to illustrate these kind of buildings that we've been doing, because they're quite complex from a spatial arrangement point of view. We exhibited this building in New York and in Venice, and so many people said to us, "Oh, these are such great simulations, will it ever get built?" We said, no, it's real. Oh, it's playing again, hang on. Okay. The next project is Skyville at Dawson, and for us this is a very meaningful project because this is a public housing project, and many of our ideas, when we'd been talking about, people say that's all very well, but you can only do such crazy buildings for the wealthy. It's not really a solution for this problem of how do you make high density very livable. So we were very excited to be commissioned to do this project with the Public Housing Board in Singapore. So this is 960 apartments in one building, and it had to be done very cost effectively using full prefabrication. And so we worked very hard to see how we could get it to fit within the budget. And we feel like it's come out very well. So it's 100% precast, prefabricated structure. Everything, including the columns, were prefabricated, and very simple and non-elaborate kind of building, but I think it's the way the components come together is where we created the value rather than the elements themselves. So here we had 110% green plot ratio, community plot ratio. So as a public housing project, we thought what was the essence of public housing is really it's a sort of social contract with the government that in return for housing, maybe we can not give people such the same lifestyle as in private housing, but we can really focus on how communities are made and how community bonds are created. And what we felt is a problem with high-rise housing and community is there's usually nowhere to interact within the building. The only time you're meeting your neighbours is in the elevator, and elevators are not a very good social space. You're basically in a small box with strangers, and you feel very stressed, and you don't really like talking to people in case they might be a little bit crazy or follow you into your house. So we thought what we really need is spaces that are very conducive to interaction, but they're safely away from your front door and they're safely away from the elevator. And what we came up with this idea that if we create a volume that everyone participates in as they go in and out of their front door, that is in a sense a kind of street or town square. And that's where, if you start seeing your neighbours' kids and they're playing or walking their dog, that you might start saying hello and building up a sense of community.